Here.
Toussaint.
Here.
Waite.
Here.
Zimmerman.
Present.
Mayor Richardson.
Here. Will you stand with me for the pledge, please? Please hand over your heart and repeat with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. City Manager's report.
Just one thing I wanted to report. Several meetings ago, there was a request that we contact Caltrans about buffered bike lanes on the Alamo Pontado Creek Bridge. We did contact them, and we did respond without a no, but they're looking at it. So not a positive yes, but at least they're investigating the option of putting buffered bike lanes on the Alamo Pontado Creek Bridge.
That's good. That's a good start. Public communications, written or verbal. At this time, please direct comments to the City Council regarding consent calendar items or matters not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the Council. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. I have a couple of speaker slips. Tracy Farhad, followed by Steve Brown.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council members, City staff, and audience. Tracy Farhad, Executive Director of the Solvang Conference and Visitors Bureau with your tourism update for the evening. I first want to just say Danish Days was a hit, even though I was not here. So it's good to actually be awake because then you can hear from everybody else how it went. I do want to thank my staff who finally had a parade entry. We had a float called Accordions Under the Sea. So I want to thank them, and we won Best Miscellaneous. I'm not sure what that means, but we'll take it. So, and thanks also to Daniel. While I was away, he stepped in as MC to help out during the festivities, and I heard he did okay too in his full Viking regalia.
And he was in the parade with his baby.
And with his baby, that's good. Also wanted to let you know for
He
August.
frightened small children.
I'm sorry?
He frightened small children.
Yes, I heard he was going to. I asked him to leave that mask behind. Our website saw a significant increase in traffic in August. So year over year, we had a 43% increase in August. You'll remember a year ago in August, there was a fire not too far away, and so that had also brought it back down. We think it also is an increase with Highway 1 opening back up and some really good extra PR that's been going out. So we were glad to see that increase. Also wanted to let you know that we sent out our sales sizzle to over 40 meeting planners from both the north and the south, and including Sacramento, with invitations to come visit. And so we'll be talking to a lot of those and following up with that Solvang sizzle reel. Other news for us is that we've got the Stomp coming. So if you haven't heard about it yet, please get your tickets, solvangusa.com/stomp. And from 2 to 5, we'll have some great a Footy Harvest Food Festival. In fact, we have local food purveyors as well as 30 tasting wineries, actually 29 plus 1 beer. So we're glad we have Solvang Brew Company there. I want to thank our key sponsors, Visit the San Ynez Valley, as well as the Shumash organization, and we also have those 30 wineries plus beer, so thanks again. We're going to have local food trucks with First and Oak, California Tacos, and David Cecchini's, so Checo's Oven. That'll be great. Not quite flatbread, but I know it'll be just as good. We've got music. Our VIP tickets are already sold out, but the general admission is available, so come and get your tickets for that. We just added the premiere of the movie Psalm 3, as in sommelier, and there's been a 1 and a 2, and now we have the ability to be able to premiere Psalm 3, which is going to be great at the Festival Theater that same evening on October 13th. So get your tickets for that. That's only $25 with a Q&A afterwards and a little after party. So we're partnering with the Vintners Association, and in fact they are receiving 10% of our proceeds for the Stomp, so they can put it towards their production. You can also get $5 off coupon for that movie if you buy your ticket to Stomp first. So let you know that. And last but not least, we have just produced what's first of, as an ongoing, we hope, Community Connection Toolkit. So what we've sent out electronically to all the businesses in town is a toolkit. It's kind of part of our concierge program. So we have the ability, through this toolkit, you can see how to submit an event. You can check your free business listing, some reciprocal links, how you can raise your SEO level higher, how to sign up for e-newsletters, listeners get our hashtags and our blog, and also use some of our shareable assets. We're sharing pictures, video, logos, flyers, our top 10 PDF of our rack card, dining guide, group classes, whatever will help our local attractions, hotels, and businesses be that concierge for whoever might come into their business and say, what is there to do? And of course, don't forget to call our visitor center, open 9 to 5, and almost 365 days out of the year. So that's it for this evening, and thank you.
Thank you. Steve Brown.
Mayor Richardson, City Council, everyone else. I am here to speak in support of the Community Energy Initiative, for Solvang. I was here for the presentation by the Coastal Power Organization, and I found it informative, compelling, and balanced. I thought it presented what I think is a technically and economically compelling case for the city to go forward, along with Santa Barbara County and others in this initiative. One of the reasons I wanted to talk about it is I felt like the opposition that I heard seemed almost nonsensical to me, and I won't go into that, but the last 8 years that I worked at University of California, I worked at Berkeley Lab. In one of the last projects I worked on was marginal electricity rates for utilities around the country. The idea was, what are the marginal rates and so forth? So we looked at both investor-owned utilities, public power utilities, and rural electric co-ops. And what we found was that generally public power utilities, rural electric co-ops did quite well. They were certainly competitive with investor-owned utilities and sometimes did better. I think that going forward, the wave is to encourage diversification of generation. The natural monopoly that PG&E owns now, and I think is tending towards, is transmission, not generation. And so I think they have welcomed and continue to welcome competitors in actual power generation. I believe also that competition has forced them to diversify, to invest in solar, and I would like to see the grid improved. And I believe that competition and the presence of other players in terms of generation will push that. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I have no other speakers slipped. Does anyone else wish to speak? Seeing none. Correspondence received by City Council. We have a letter from Allen Hancock College. That's next, right? Council comments and requests. I skipped one. Okay, we'll start out. Joni, would you like to start on that council comments and requests?
Part of Danish Day celebration was many activities at Theater Fest. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night, the place was full. And I went to the one on Friday night, and it was the Delta II ISET information, and it was fascinating. And of course, then the next morning at about 5, actually it was supposed to be 5:46, but didn't go off until 6:04, the final Delta II from Vandenberg lifted off. And you could hear it, you could kind of feel the compression, but you couldn't see it at all. It was too foggy. But there was a gentleman from Denmark that worked on this project, and he's been working for 10 years, and you could tell that it was his baby that was going to be launched, and he was very proud of it. And what it's going to do is it's going to measure the depth of the ice, wherever the ice is found on the Earth. And it's going to send down lasers, and in 1 second, 10,000 lasers will hit the Earth wherever they're measuring it, which is fascinating to me, how that can happen, how many can happen in a second. Anyway, it was a nice presentation. It was very artistic in its presentation, and they should be very proud of the fact of what the final Delta II is up there, and it's going to take 3 years for it to complete its task. Danish Days was great. I thought it was fun. Lots going on. And then I have a question for our city attorney as to how this election might shake out if certain things happen, and what will be our choices as to how we may have to appoint a person on our council. So let's say that the mayor, our present mayor, does not win his position and Ryan moves over. What happens?
Because the office of council member and the office of mayor are separate offices, Councilmember Toussaint, assuming the position as mayor, would therefore vacate the position as council member. There would be a vacancy in that position. And under Government Code Section 36.521, I believe, the council has 60 days to do one of two things, either appoint a replacement or call for a special election.
Okay, so we do an application process. Okay.
It's the same thing we just experienced with Karen.
No, that was different with Karen. Karen, we appointed her because she was the next one in line with votes. That's what we took into consideration, and then we changed our.
I think we were discussing whether we should go to an election or not because of that.
Well,
Yeah,
yes, we did
yeah.
discuss it, but that's not how it ended up.
So,
Okay, those are just my comments.
Ryan?
So I just went to Leah, California Cities in Long Beach. It's a good update on some of the items coming down from the state and other subjects that might eventually end up at the council. And then spent a decent chunk of time at the trade show event and found several things I might want to introduce at some point for us to consider. And then I brought back little gifts for everyone. The little handouts from the trade show. So I figured with election season, little stress balls.
Thank you. Oh, good idea.
Stress out?
Yeah. And
Hey, we're gonna do this. What do you mean by that?
got it. Okay. And then for Brad, since he's retiring, I got him something else. He'll probably be spending some extra time at the beach, so you get a beach towel. And I have an extra stress ball if you feel a little stressed out. That's my comments for the night.
You should give credit to who provided those. The
So-
City
Yeah,
of
City-
City of Porterville.
Yeah.
Neil? Comments?
No comment tonight.
Karen?
Yes, I do have a couple comments. First of all, Danish Days was fantastic. It was a lot of fun. Very well done. The evening of the NASA Comes to Solvang at the Theater Fest, I was approached by Elizabeth Farnham, who brought to my attention something that falls right in line with issues that we've been discussing, such as smoking ordinances. And I had no idea, but I'd like to just read this very quickly. She said, "Did you know that there may be grant funding available?" It's called Prop 56 funding available to local governments and law enforcement to reduce illegal sales of tobacco. And basically what this is for is to target minors, to try to dissuade minors from smoking and vaping. And apparently the California Healthcare Research and Prevention Tax Act of 2016 provides funds to any local public agency within the state of California that has authority to enforce tobacco-related state laws or local ordinances. This may include cities, counties, public school districts, college districts, law enforcement agencies, city attorneys, and county councilors. So these funds may be used to enforce state and local laws related to illegal sale and marketing of tobacco products to minors and youth, including retailer compliance checks, retailer training programs, installation of signage such as no smoking here, youth outreach, tobacco retail license inspection, and preventing and deterring of use of tobacco products on school premises. Unfortunately, the deadline to apply for this grant is October 5th, 2018. I didn't know about it, but I wanted to bring it up because as we change ordinances and introduce ordinances, I feel that some of it is our responsibility to go out there and know about stuff like this. So basically, the grant supports localities as they work to combat the illegal sale of tobacco to minors. So, and I know we've had some some outspoken individuals in the community that represent health of our youth and health in our community. So this might be something we might want to look into. That was my first comment there. So I think it's very important. My second comment is that I attended a presentation given by a gentleman named Russell Chamberlain regarding carbon farming. And this also just happens to fall into our conversations about open space and urban boundaries and how we use our open space. And I felt, he sent me an email, and I felt that it might be worthwhile having Russell Chamberlain come and speak to us about the carbon farming and what that's all about, and show us his statistics and data on how it's been working out on the Chamberlain Ranch as compared to other ranches when we're talking about open space and land and urban development and whatnot. There you go. That's it.
Do we want to schedule a presentation?
I would love to schedule a presentation.
You want to do that?
I will.
My comments are is that the League of California Cities convention was very well attended, as a matter of fact, but only by us, I think. there was our friends to the west were shy, but the presentations were amazing, and I picked up a lot of information, and I just hope I can retain it. The presentations are on a website that we can go back and reference. But there was stuff on the retirement PERS and others. So when we come to those things, at least those are available to us to research. I also want to mention that I attended the 50th anniversary celebration of the founding and the dedication of the Avenue of Flags in Buellton Saturday. And it was well attended by probably better than 100 people. Several of the people there were there at the original dedication. The interesting thing was that Michael Reagan, the son of the president, spoke, and he indicated, and we should be proud, that they have the president's son, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren frequent Solvang very frequently. They come twice a year, in May particularly, to run half marathons, and they spend Thanksgiving here and with a family reunion. And I thought that was very important to know that the connection is still there, the legacy is still there, and that the Solvang is in their hearts. So I think we all should be aware of that. And that's the end of my comments. Now we can go to correspondence received from City Council. And it was a letter from Alan Hancock thanking us for our donation to the Hancock Promise program. And in particular, there was a note here, and I'd like to read that note. It says, "Thank you so much. We appreciate Joni's leadership also." So you should be aware that Joni kind of spearheaded it, and it was very well accepted. And then we also received a letter from the San Ynez Valley Wind Ensemble thanking us for our contribution. Does anybody have any comments on that? Next is the consent agenda. Does anybody want to pull any of those items on the consent calendar?
I'll move that we accept A through E.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Toussaint?
Yes.
Zimmerman?
Yes.
Jameson?
Yes.
Waite?
Yes.
Mayor Richardson?
Yes, and that passes with a 5-0. On to the regular agenda, item number 5.
Item 5, shade structure at Solvang Park.
Staff report.
Good evening, Mayor, Council members. I'm Fred Lageman, Parks and Recreation Director with the City of Solvang. And tonight I'm here to discuss the installation of a possible shade structure at Solvang Park. As you know, the Maytins trees there have not made it, and it's very unfortunate. But I've been trying to clarify with a few people in the public the reason behind the initial deck installation, which was installed because of a trip hazard with the Maytins trees. If you're very familiar with the park, where the deck is now, during the drought particularly, the roots grew even more up towards the surface, looking for any water they could get. It eventually posed a significant trip hazard. We spoke to an arborist regarding, can we remove the roots and keep the trees? They said guaranteed failure, that the trees are going to pass. So we came up with the idea of putting the deck in there, and with the continuation of the drought and some root disturbance and putting in the footings, the trees ultimately did not make it. So as a result, and even prior to that deck installation, when we were meeting with the still formed Solvang Parks and Rec Commission, we came up with a few alternatives. Ideas were bashed around as to what to do to replace them, whether we just put trees there, whether we put concrete planters, post and shade structure. Several options were discussed. However, in this summer, I met recently with Mr. Toussaint and Ms. Waite, the ad hoc committee now for Parks and Rec, on site at the park to discuss some of the possible suggestions and solutions for shade structure. And one of the ones that we did discuss was a cantilever system that would be a post and steel system. The post would be exactly where the tree trunks are currently, and the cantilever would stretch out approximately 10 to 12 feet in both directions over the deck as well as the existing picnic benches. Staff created a conceptual drawing, and we sent it to a company that we've utilized in the past, both at Sunnyfields Park and Hans Christian Andersen Park. They sent back a artist's rendering that you see there on your staff report, and it was, and now you have it there, but during the City Council's discussion on the capital improvement plan recently, $100,000 was pulled from a potential project at HCA Park regarding paving the road. So it is possible that we could take some of that money and utilize it towards a shade structure, whether this or another one. And we estimate the cost for the current one in front of you to be approximately $50,000. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Are there any questions? I have one. This structure looks very modern. Solvang is not necessarily a modern town. Have there been any other suggestions that would kind of blend with our architecture?
Well, early on through the Parks and Rec Commission several years ago, a shade fabric structure was one of the most popular. The other was to take some of the concrete planters that you see around town, like that has the signposts, and install those where the existing trees are, and either plant them with a small bush-type tree, or just put flowers and eliminate the shade, or actually even put kind of like a patio umbrella, which would be, obviously, we'd have to do something more commercial. So that was another popular one. Putting a tree in the exact same space of a tree, it seems to be a coin toss between the arborists and the tree experts I've spoke to. Some say you can do it, others suggest against it. So that's kind of a risk if we were just to dig out the current tree, grind the stump, and shove another one right in the same place. That was why a planter was suggested.
Any other comments?
I have a couple comments. I think that the structure, this is just my opinion, I think it's too imposing. I think it's too, it doesn't fit with the park. It doesn't fit with the gazebo, in my opinion. This is just my opinion. I've expressed this to you. There are shade structures that are more, less imposing. And I tried to explain to you that some of the horse farms around here have shade structures for their horses. And they're made out of material, and they're either a fairly good-sized piece of wood, a pole, or they use metal like this one does. But it's just not this thing that's stuck in the ground and comes out, flies out. It's more gentle. It just doesn't look like, boom, here I am. And I don't like the color at all. So I don't know if the color is something that we can
Color was
change.
just part of the artist's rendering.
That's just, it's
There was
too
an
bold.
endless variety of colors, believe
It's
you
too-
me.
It's too bold. So that's I don't like it. I would not vote for it. I would like to see something come back that is a little more gentle in its appearance and not so overwhelming, and I think it's going to take away from the gazebo.
One thing I had worked on with Parks and Rec Commission several years back too, that I only partially got involved in, or to completion of, was to do a superimpose a shade structure on a picture of the park so you could see it in, you know, more a real life situation versus that one's just sitting on a blank piece of paper. So I could come back with something like that.
Have you looked at a pergola?
Like a wood construction, that did not come up, so no, I have not done a lot of research on a pergola.
Okay.
For that type of size, it would definitely be some beefy material.
Right, it would be.
Okay, thank you.
I just
you.
have one comment.
Sure.
Was this put in front of the Board of Architectural Review?
No, it has not.
Because they're very creative, and they might come up with, I mean, I'm not unopposed, or I'm not opposed to this. I don't mind the modern. I think there's a lot of modernism going on in Danish culture. But the pergola is a great idea also. I just didn't happen to think of that when we were having our conversation. But Board of Architectural Review has some very creative people, and they might be able to throw something out there that we haven't thought of as a solution.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah. Thank you, Fred.
Thank you.
Is there any public comment? I have no speaker slips. Does anybody wish to comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the council for discussion and action. Our action is to let
I
Fred go
would
ahead
send it
and
back. I
get-
would send it back
Yeah.
to Fred
Well,
and have
you
it.
can approve the project and direct us to go to the BAR with different alternative designs.
Yeah.
If you, essentially what we're looking for is the budget adjustment to have the funds available to do something.
I can agree to that, but
And
not to this
would
design.
a pergola be significantly more expensive than?
We'd have
It's
to
just
look at that with somebody more design oriented than Fred's tent guy. So yeah.
Well, the recommended action is to approve the project for installation of a shade structure and also a budget adjustment. Do we want to go ahead with those recommendations?
No,
So we could probably direct that this goes to the BAR for review and then allow some form of budget adjustment.
Yeah,
Not to exceed.
the budget adjustment we have in there is to take 50 of the 100,000 that was saved of the other project. You could move forward with that. I mean, we're not going to expend it until we have a project that you like. We could take it to the BR and then bring it back to you as a body to see the final product before
why
we
don't,
take
why
it
don't
out.
we wait until we know what it's going to cost before we make the,
Yeah.
budget
Let's
adjustment.
just give direction to Fred to continue on with the research on the item and come back to us with other ideas. Good? Is that appropriate?
Sounds great.
Okay, thank you. On to item 6.
Item 6, Planning Department Work Plan.
Staff report?
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, staff and members of the public. I bring to you a visual aid tonight. This is my copy of my general plan that resides in my office on my bookshelf. You can see it's a little tattered, a little overstuffed, and definitely filled with Post-it notes. But what that means to you tonight is just briefly, I would like to review the importance of this document and why it's not just for planning nerds. It really is a legal document. When I said rather emphatically a couple of weeks ago that it was our Bible, it was from a source of conviction, but really it is a legal document that we are required to follow. We're required to follow it with findings when we approve projects. We have to make the findings that are in here, and this document has sort of a trickle-down effect in that our zoning ordinance really stems from this. When you look at the legal hierarchy, this is on top. We look to it for consistency within elements, as well as hopefully consistency with the zoning ordinance. And it is also the source of lawsuits for cities when you do not you do not comply with your own general plan. Now, Solvang is a unique animal. We are almost built out. We don't have a lot of development. And so using this as a resource to evaluate council and city decisions isn't done as much as it would be perhaps in other cities that are experiencing a lot of growth. But that said, it is still indeed our legal document. So this is a document that is required to be updated by the state. There are 7 elements that are required by every city and every county to have in their general plan. I've listed them here in the staff report, but we also have a couple of additional ones that we have. I know that Fred's pretty familiar with the parks element. Some people roll that into open space, but apparently Solvang decided previously that it was important enough to have a standalone element. And we also have a community design element, which I think for lots of obvious reasons, we consider that very important for our community, and I'll get to the update on that a little bit later. Some have healthy communities elements. Some have economic development elements. It really just depends on the town and the interest or the ability of the citizens to bring forward a special additional element that wouldn't be required, but it reflects the values of the community. So as I said, we are pretty built out. I think we all know that. We will continue to see population growth. I'm just here to tell you that just this week even we had some potential projects come in for some more residential units to be added. So what we see now is the need more than ever just to make sure that we have taken the time to review our land use and circulation elements. They are overdue. They were done in 2008. That's not unusual for a small town of our size and for our population. But that said, it's always useful to evaluate those very important elements to make sure that they still reflect our zoning, still reflect our priorities, that the traffic is still that was identified as desirable or that moved in certain ways through our city still reflects reality today. So traffic studies will be done. To update the land use element and the circulation element is usually a bigger lift in a few ways. One of the ways in which it's a big deal is that it usually requires an EIR, which is a more robust CEQA document. The good news about doing that once in a great while is that you can pull from that as in future years to use as your base environmental document for other land use decisions that you might need to make. So in some ways it's a big push to do that. It's required to do that, but then you have that document to draw on in the future. You see from my report too that we've had some updates as time has gone on. Open space element was updated in 2016. The conservation element was also updated in 2016. Some of these are not as complicated to update over time, but it's good that we did that, and that leaves some of the bigger items, and one of the biggest are these two. The other one is the housing element. Now you might wonder why, if it's required to be updated every 5 years, why are we, why aren't we putting a big push on this right now? Well, that gets a little more complicated in terms of the housing allocation that the state gives us. They give everybody a number, and everybody needs to show the effort that they're going to try to meet those housing numbers. They're very low, moderate, and market rate housing. And we don't know at this time what our number is going to be. That is handed down from Housing and Community Development to every county, and the counties divvy it out to every city. So at some point, we'll be given a number, a housing number, that we need to theoretically meet. Not that year, not in the next 2 years, but at least show that we can accommodate that kind of housing. So that, although that is a critical element to update, it's not really in our control at this point to update it at this point or put it on a work plan. It does need to dovetail, however, with the land use element, because you're looking at land use, at zoning. And it could be that our numbers, because we have so little vacant land, it could be that the numbers we're given to meet for for housing from the state would dictate a different approach in our land use element for density, for instance. We might find that we're just out of space, but we need to accommodate, 150 houses. So how do you do that when you have no land? You would have to rezone or create different zoning designations to accommodate the remaining parcel density in the remaining parcels. What we'll probably see over time is redevelopment in a bigger way. We may see what they call scrape and rebuild, or demoing and repurposing. So much of that is driven by the local economy and the demand, and that's rather out of our hands. But for that, at least we know what our plans are going forward. I've mentioned briefly on the community design element. That's high on my priority list. You see it on the attachment here where I have the spreadsheet. I plan to go to a conference next week, and there'll be a lot of professionals there who are specialized in community outreach and engagement. I'm looking for that first and foremost from anybody who would give us, provide us service in updating our elements in the community, because I think it's critical that they have a strong skill set in that. And of course, for us, it's a unique eye for design. We have a community design element that's from 1988. We've seen some deviations from that over time. It's time to at least have that community conversation and refresh that and move forward. I also mentioned the sign ordinance in that, and we mentioned that in the Economic Development Committee meeting the other night. And that will be, a subcommittee will be formed to bring some recommendations to be integrated into that community design element in the next year or so. So with this, I wanted to give you this to give you a sense of where we're going in terms of planning. And you have your budget pages. You have also attachment A, so you see the flow chart of the kind of work that's done by the consultants when they do that public outreach. There'll be plenty of meetings and plenty of time for everybody's voice to be heard. I think the most frustrating part might be is if you are on meeting number 13 and somebody shows up and says, what about this issue? And you talked about that back in meeting 2. Those things happen in a community engagement process, so you have to sort of be patient and bring people along as they become engaged, and you have to take them where they are. So with that, I'm available for any questions. It was meant to be an update and an overview of what my work life is going to look like in the next 2 or 3 years, and I'm available to answer any questions.
Are there any questions? Staff report. Karen?
Yes. So you did mention that should council or city not follow what's put out there in the general plan, that it could open us up for some sort of lawsuit or liability?
I think Dave would have the expertise to address maybe even some personal experiences with that, or not.
I mean, the case reports are filled with cases of cities approving development inconsistent with their general plans. And those cases tend to be losers for cities because if they get brought, there are attorney's fees involved, the projects get halted, and so on. As for specific projects that are in conflict with general plan, I've only been involved in a couple of them over the years. I typically don't get involved in the litigation, but they tend to be long, drawn-out bits of litigation in which there's hundreds of thousands of dollars expended in legal fees.
Okay, thank you.
And like every legal action, for an attorney to bring it forward, it can be a very loose basis. I saw it in Kingsburg with a project that a small number of community members wanted to stop, and there was discussion about the general plan not being updated, and that was the basis of that didn't reflect the current what the land uses were being proposed, and that was the extent of the case, but that was enough to tie up the city attorney time and money for a while to meet those concerns.
Okay, so it sounds to me as though we need some updates, and we need to stick to what our general city plan is as much as we can, but it does require updates.
It's
In a nutshell.
wise to update it.
Okay.
Yes.
Are there any other comments?
I just
Staff
have,
report.
I just have a comment. If you do want to make changes, you can go through a general plan amendment, and you can do a rezone. It's very costly. Sometimes it doesn't get approved, but there is that outlet that you can do.
Yes, and if there is a general plan text amendment, if there's something that's written that's a little vague or is misconstrued by applicants or the public or even staff, and it was, the interpretation is in some ways subject to some question or needs clarity, that can be done too. So it's a living document. It does move over time, and if you're doing your job consistently as a planner and as city staff, you're aware of some of these discrepancies, or maybe one of the elements describes a feature in one way, and then it's not so clear in the next element, and they need to be, as I said, internally compatible. So you're always looking for that internal consistency also.
I have one more question.
Yes.
How do you think the ADU situation in California now is going to change what are going to be the requirements of communities as far as low-cost housing is?
The good news is, as of now, the way in which ADUs are counted towards your housing allocation number are fairly left up to the definition of the jurisdiction. And so I am myself, for Solvang, calling it lower, not low income, because really that's a different category, but lower income to moderate housing. It's rental. It's one way in which cities that are very built out are trying to meet their housing allocation numbers. I remember I went to a presentation at a conference, and the person from Piedmont, which is the very wealthy suburb of Oakland, was talking. Been built out for decades. No desire to grow, can't grow. I mean, they're surrounded by the city of Oakland, but they were trying to massage the ADU, their ADU ordinance, to make sure that they could allow as many units as possible and thereby meet your arena numbers. And that's, I guess, the other thing to know about your housing element numbers is housing and community development does not care if you don't have the land available to meet those numbers. They say, that's your problem. You go zone for more, you create greater density. They just say, here's your number, you go figure it out. So that'll be an interesting challenge going forward. We had a number of 175 units to meet. That's why I came to you with some annual reports to get us caught up, to see where we were at. We're actually in a pretty good shape, but I am a little concerned, I must say, to see what comes down our way in the next couple of years when we are asked to meet it, and we will make that happen.
So will the state come in then, or not come in, but take a look at the city of Solvang and the number of lots and the size of the lots and decide that, hey, you guys could have 500 ADUs?
Well, that's part of your. That's why I think hiring a consultant to do your housing element would be wise at this time. It's an interesting art and a conversation that you have with housing and community development. You look at you do a vacant parcel inventory, which we have now. It's in our general plan if you want to look at it. And over the last couple of years, I've been doing this. I've been crossing them off the list because they're disappearing. Like every month, there's somebody who's looking at one, or there's a proposal. Now, some of those haven't yet materialized, but they've been development plans or proposals that have come to me, and these are serious projects. So that's part of what you would look at, is what you have for available land that's left. What can be rezoned? Let's say you look at your professional office zoning or your land use designation, and I can think of a few right now that have sat vacant for a long time, and then you have to decide how if accommodating your new housing would would be best served by a rezone, then you need to strongly consider it. There are other ways to meet those housing numbers, too. It's not anything we need to be concerned about this year. But as we go forward and look at land use and circulation element updating, that will kind of that will dovetail into that, because that will be something we'll have to consider to update our land use element too.
It's been my understanding that the new development that's now being graded over behind or near New Frontiers Market, that they came in and applied for ADUs
Yes.
on all of the parcels?
That is the proposal right now. Yes.
It's a proposal. It hasn't been accepted.
No, they're just submitted
Okay.
as of this week.
Are there any other comments? With that, thank you.
You're welcome.
We'll go to the public now for public comment. I have one speaker slip, Susan Bott.
Good evening. I'm Susan Bott, representing Save Our Solvang. Save Our Solvang requests that the City Council add the preparation of an urban growth boundary ordinance to the general plan update process. Since there are several viable models upon which to base such an ordinance, it needn't be too difficult to fold this effort into the process. We've done extensive research on various California cities' urban growth boundary ordinances, and it should be possible to adapt one or more of those with minimal modifications. The city of Cotati, in particular, seems similar to Solvang's situation in the size and so forth. And our members are ready to work with City Council staff in any way we can to help. And looking at the proposed general plan update schedule, that process might not be completed before November 2020 election. An urban growth boundary ordinance could be discussed and developed during the process in time for that election. So even if the general plan wasn't done, the urban growth boundary could be on the ballot. If adopted by either City Council or a citizen vote, the urban growth boundary can then be folded into the updated general plan. Thanks very much for your consideration.
Are you suggesting the next election or the election 2020?
2020.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That is the next election. We're not counting this one.
No, no.
Okay,
Thank you,
thanks.
Susan. I have no other speaker slip. Does anyone wish to speak? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the council for action. Any comments? Do you want to take the recommendation and make a motion with that, please? Which is to receive the staff report. I guess we've received it.
Okay, I'll make a motion to receive the staff report.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passed 5-0. On to item number 7.
Item 7, accessory
ADUs.
dwelling unit, ADU discussion.
Staff report.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, and members of the public and staff. I'm here with your second update of the night on some of the planning issues. This has been a topic that has been discussed both internally in my department and also with some of you who have been interested in where we might be going with the accessory dwelling unit ordinance. I'm just going to call it ADU for now on. That might be easier. We have a second residential unit ordinance, as you're aware, that exists. But however, that has been superseded by state law. I must say that when it comes to accessory dwelling units, this has attracted a large amount of attention by our legislature. They tried for a couple of new bills this year. They did not pass. They were much more strict when it came to any kind of ordinances and regulations that individual jurisdictions may want to put on them. I think that for a lot of the legislators, this is an easy way to look like they're doing something about the housing crisis, and the affordable housing crisis in particular. That said, I have a list of some of the facts of where the state law is now, what we can and cannot do in terms of crafting a new ordinance. That changes all the time, but at some point you just have to draw a line in the sand and say, let's move forward with our ordinance, and if we have to revise it because of some future legislation, well, then so be it. But if you look down the list of jurisdictions that have actually completed and adopted accessory dwelling units, I would have to say that it's about a third of the jurisdictions in the state. So many of them are either deferring to the state law, or they're working on their own ordinances. Some places don't have the strong interest for ADUs, but I've seen a bunch of proposals that really are attractive. I've seen some great handouts that are available for people who want to consider ADUs and what they need to know about it. I've got one here from Los Angeles that I just pulled off the internet today. It shows, you know, it gives you a big checklist, what you can and can't do, a little plot plan, and various graphics and visuals for people to review when they want to consider doing that. Now, one of the issues I think that we have in this area of the state is that we're not only constrained, but that I believe we're about $300 a square foot right now for new construction. So what we've only seen a few new proposed ADUs, but what we've mostly seen is people coming in to try to legitimize what they already have, or they've been thinking of turning that guest house into a more permanent rental space. So my recommendation at this point is to take what we know and that we can control, and take those few items, and there really are a few at this point, in terms of lot coverage, in terms of design standards, and in terms, you know, of those issues of connection fees. Pull those all together and compare them with other jurisdictions in the area, especially since I think we have to consider market considerations when we craft our ordinance, and then bring it forward for Planning Commission recommendation and approval, hopefully by the end of the year. So my staff we're researching this right now, and with we seek recommendations from you. I'm here to answer as many questions as I can, but it is a moving target, and as time goes by, precedent and legal cases are setting the path for what we can and cannot do for this type of housing. That concludes my staff report, and I'm available for recommendations.
Are there any questions of staff report?
I have a question. Currently, how do we deal with, or how would this affect an owner who owns a home that has a guest home, and the owner rents both out?
At this point, that's not allowed, and that is a state. The state is given the jurisdiction, the authority to separate that, because really at that point you're not talking about a residential neighborhood. You're really talking more about apartments, really. One that looks like a big single-family house and one that looks like a small guest house.
And they're both
they're both being rented. Mm-hmm.
So, but what she's saying
how we would enforce that is not clear to me. We'd have to know about it, I guess. But that going forward, that's part of why we ask participants with ADUs to sign a covenant that would require residents on the single family
or to reside in one of the other properties.
One or the other. Yes, you could rent out the big one and live in the small one, which I plan to do when I'm old.
It carries with the property ad infinitum.
Yes, it runs with the land. It's a recorded document. And the reason for that, I think, is for those of us who believe that the residential neighborhoods serve first and foremost citizens who pay taxes here, who shop here, who vote here, who have an investment in the community, deserve to have those places available to them. I've seen some cities, for instance, Healdsburg, where things got a little out of hand there, and what they had was a lot of the residential housing stock snatched up by vacation rentals or just long-term rentals. And they had, what you have is a hollowing out of your community. And this is my planner side talking, mind you. But you had what you want for a strong, stable, healthy, diverse community is places for people to live, young people and old people and families who have an investment in your community. So that's why Solvang has always had a covenant. And I think most cities that I've worked in have the same. So that was the intent for that.
To clarify, though, that is one of the few areas that we do have discretion
Yes.
over saying whether we require that or not.
Yes,
What's the
that's
state
one of
law?
the few areas.
Isn't that part of the state law that it has to be owner occupied?
I think it is actually.
No.
I'd have to review the long list. David, do you know the
Yeah,
answer
it's
to
not
that?
a requirement of state law. What the state law says is that the city may require an applicant for a permit issued for an accessory dwelling unit to be an owner occupant. So that is a requirement that the city can impose, but it's not imposed by the state.
What if the county imposes it?
The county doesn't have jurisdiction over us, at least within the city limits.
Good thing.
Have you looked at Santa Barbara and Santa Maria? They just went through this process.
Yes, and
didn't
Goleta did also, just recently, in the last month or two. So there are local resources available to look at, and I know that I can call on Dave to review whatever we may have to propose. We also have to actually send up that ordinance to Housing and Community Development for their approval. So they are serving as the eyes and the screening for what jurisdictions are drafting, which is the intent, the spirit and the intent of the legislation.
Is it your plan to merge or meld the state law with our ordinance?
Well, I will take a look at our ordinance and see what can still remain, and then there will be some recommendations that will be derived from other jurisdictions as to how they handle certain issues. I think one of them for me is that I want to research is lot coverage, see what's proportional. What if you have a very small lot, how small do you want to go before you, and how small does the corresponding ADU should be, could be. We have the ability to make recommendations in that, or actually make requirements in that regard. We also have the ability to make requirements in terms of design review. Although I believe we cannot bring it to BAR, we can do it administratively, which we have the right to do. We have the ability to put in some recommendations or requirements for height. Right now, the height limit is 35 feet in the residential districts. Do we want a 35-foot ADU?
Tall and skinny.
Tall and skinny. Well, and so definitely there's some research to be done. And I think for me and for when I think about neighborhood integrity, I want to see the cohesiveness maintained in the neighborhoods. I would prefer not to see a tough shed in somebody's backyard. I would prefer not to see a 35-foot structure. I want to make sure that the surrounding neighborhood still has the privacy issues that are met and you can require those by design. There are some things we can't necessarily legislate, like parking. Parking is more or less off the table at this point because of some of the guidelines that the state has mandated.
Are there other questions? Joni?
Okay, water and sewer.
Yes.
How many more units can we handle water-wise? And if we're going to have 500, I'm just using a number, 500 ADUs, what is that going to do to our wastewater treatment plant? And is that going to allow us to still take the wastewater from Los Olivos, Ballard, and Community Services District?
That would probably be a public works, city engineering question. I think that's a good one to, Brad's.
Yeah, and that'd be
Brad?
part of what we bring back. I think actually in the study, the wastewater study, they had calculated some ADUs in that future capacity, but we definitely would bring that as part of the ADU. What kind of capacity we have for water and sewer.
Okay.
In the past year, how many people have actually legalized or come to the city with a?
Probably 6 or
Okay.
7. Small
Just
number.
wait, they're out there waiting.
They're out there waiting, and I appreciate the
They've
pause
had,
in the
like, what, 2
action
years
while
now?
we try to. Well, and we want to be able to. I mean, it really is a way for generations to continue living together amicably and with a degree of privacy. And I mean, I'm just speaking from personal experience. I have a mortgage. I have an ADU. It really helps. It's a tremendous help. I have a great renter. You know, there's just another person on. I think as we see people wanting to age in place, it makes a lot of sense to be able to have that resource and as part of your support network to help with your mortgage, to have that place to live. If you want to move out of the area and rent the big house out, you still have a little house to come back to. I mean, there's increasingly, even AARP is getting involved in housing discussions, and you can see on their website it's robust. This is a big conversation that's happening all over the United States because we're all realizing that we would like to stay in our houses, or we would like to have our children come back home, but we don't necessarily want to run into them in the hallway. You know what I mean? So I really think this is a larger issue that we're struggling with, and it's an opportunity in our society to take advantage of. We just want to make sure that it's compatible with the existing neighborhoods, and that we control what we can to get the fine product that we're used to seeing.
Are there any other questions?
One more. I find the internal ADU, part of the existing house,
Right.
to be very interesting, but also maybe very difficult to monitor.
Yes,
So what do we do?
that remains to be seen.
Okay.
Anything
We
else?
have,
So it seems to me that most of the ADUs are already in place, whether they're legal or not.
there's a lot of housing that's in place in this town, whether it's legal or not.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going with how many people have actually, they're either already in place and they're not coming in now with this opportunity to get it legalized right now.
It may be an enforcement issue down the road, but certainly with a limited staff, and we have lots of, you can talk to code compliance, and you can see how busy we are with other issues, and some of those may take our attention over time. But for now, we need to move forward with the best intentions and the clearest ordinance that we can that's legally defensible. So,
Well, let's go to the public for comment.
thank you.
Thank you, Holly. I have no speaker slip regarding this item. Does anybody in the public wish to comment on this? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the council for action. And the recommendation is just give direction to staff regarding ADUs in Solvang. Is there any direction other than what she's presented us with? I guess not.
Well, what I heard was you want water and sewer capacity as part of the
Yeah.
ordinance.
Thank you, Holly.
And just to be clear, you were interested in making one of the requirements an owner-occupant
Yes.
as opposed to both rentals?
That brings us to council member reports. Does anybody have any council member reports besides me?
I have one, but Shirley is supposed to be here giving it, but I'll read her report. But why don't you go ahead while I find it?
I'm going to, gotta get to mine.
Oh, you can find yours too. Okay.
Mine is an SBCAG meeting we had last week. It was rather quickly done too. With the consent calendar was huge and was voted with nobody pulling any of the items. We talked about the 2018 Measure A strategic plan and proposals to adopt resolution regarding Proposition 6. The SBCAG, as you know, is a transportation coordinator for the county and works in partnership with Caltrans in state highways, and is interested in SB1 revenue to continue on with particularly the widening of the 101 freeway and other local roads. So there was a resolution passed 10-3. Three folks decided to vote no on it, but the resolution is that they want to see Proposition 6 defeated to continue on with the revenue from SB1. There was a Measure A annual report which pointed out all the successes in highway construction during the year, and the Caltrans district report talked about some of the work they're doing on the highways within the county. And there were committee meetings, one of LOSAN, which is the Pacific Surfliner, and its railroad replacing cars. People are starting to use the train from Ventura to Santa Barbara and return. They're seeing an increase in ridership, and we get comments all of the time about sitting down and relaxing on the train and watching the people stacked up on the freeway waiting to get to Ventura or waiting to get to Santa Barbara. Plus they could have an evening drink on the way home. So it's a good thing. And the next meeting will be in October. That's the end of my report.
Okay, I just have some brief comments from Shirley on the County Library Advisory Committee. Evidently, they've hired a consultant to look into better communication with Friends of the Libraries at the various branches. Budget revisions are coming in December 1st, and they need to know where Solvang and Buellton's going to be. And then there's access issues for the Senior Center partnership with the library in Solvang. The funding for struggling libraries went to Carpinteria and Montecito, and unfortunately Guadalupe was left out of that. Goleta City Council has not weighed in yet on taking Solvang and Buellton. Payment of fees has not yet been established, but it has been established that the computers and the furnishings belong to Santa Barbara County, therefore we will be able to use them and keep them in Solvang. The ad hoc committee representatives are going to be Judith Dale and Pat Saley, and they will be meeting with Ryder Bailey and library directors on financial issues. That was one of the recommendations of the consultants that we had last year. And the next meeting will be December 12th. So the question is, where will Solvang and Buellton be next year?
How did Montecito wind up with money for struggling libraries?
Good question.
If that's all the committee reports, I wanted to make you aware of the advance calendar item for next meeting. One of the interesting one is going to be the CalPERS presentation. I think that we ought to get a good turnout for that one. And the tobacco and smoking ordinance amendment will be there, and the resolution talk about the number of medical cannabis dispensaries and exemption from the congestion management program, CMP. So we expect to see a full room next time. And with that, if there's no other discussion, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you.